Let's talk about masks, not these masks, but fencing masks. A new mask from Armingil called the Rearguard. Now, I should mention that I have been using a prototype of one of these masks for a couple of years at least. And I have to say that I absolutely love that mask. It's probably the best HEMA mask that I've ever owned and used for a number of reasons. In fact, for two main reasons. Okay, number one, the mesh is very strong on it. Now, we often talk about Newton ratings when we're talking about fencing masks, but the simple fact is that the Newton ratings relate to the bib. Okay, they relate to the fabric. They don't relate to the mesh. So if you've got an 800 or 1600 Newton rated mask, that doesn't necessarily tell you that the mesh is equally strong. It may do, and it may be indicative. A higher Newton rating of the bib often may, by coincidence, mean that you've got a better made mesh and a stronger mesh, but it doesn't guarantee that. And we have to, whenever we start talking about fencing masks in a HEMA context, remind people that these weren't designed originally, fencing masks weren't designed with being hit by long swords and other similar things in mind. They were designed for the three modern fencing weapons of foil epee and sabre, sabre being the Olympic version of about 400 grams. So the fact is that when we use and adapt and modify fencing masks, we're trying to essentially polish a turd. We're trying to make something suit our hobby, and our martial art and our sport that wasn't designed from the bottom up to do that job. But what I think the Armingil and what they've done with the Rearguard model is pretty much getting closer, I think, to an optimum sort of achievement of what you can do with a fencing mask in terms of making it better for HEMA. So what have they done? Well, first of all, they have made a thick bib. They have made an interchangeable liner which you can wash and change out more easily. Very importantly, and the reason it's called Rearguard, it has mesh added on the back here. It also has an add-on bit that can come down the nape of the neck. They have also added a reinforcing part on the brow, and very importantly, they have used really strong mesh. Now, as I said, the prototype I've been using for a couple of years has got very strong mesh on it, and actually that is one of the main things I look for from a fencing mask. So even if I'm just using a typical instructor's mask or sabre fencing mask for modern fencing from any company, then I'll shop around and I'll look for the one which people say has got the strongest mesh on it. And there's a few different well-known manufacturers of fencing masks, and certain of them are known to have quite soft mesh, naming no names, and some of them are unreliable. They can have one model mask that is really strong, one model mask that's really soft, and everything in between. I have had mesh on a now defunct brand that was quite highly thought of by people in HEMA at the time that broke on me, smashed bits of metal into my face. They sent me a replacement, and the exact same thing happened to that again. So some masks can be brittle, and some masks can just be really tough, really good. They can have a good combination of hardness and toughness. And I have to say that the Armingil guys have absolutely hit on, certainly as far as I've experienced so far, a really strong, good quality mesh. So before I go on and make any kind of constructive or even negative comments about this, I want to say that fundamentally I think they've got a really good design here, and for me at the moment this is the optimum HEMA mask, and this is the mask that I recommend that people would get if they can get hold of one. And obviously distribution networks are going to be an issue as well, but anyway, link below to Armingil and we can work out that detail later. But the fact is that I think this is pretty much, for what's available at the moment, an optimum HEMA training mask. Now, I said that I would talk a little bit more about the back bib section. Now, I know that this is a work in progress, and I think that a little bit more work needs to be done on this perhaps, but at the moment I have got this back of head piece, and this has got holes in it ready to be attached, but it's not, I don't think it's clearly thought out exactly what needs to happen with the nape of the neck here with the back. But fundamentally this is a great idea. Now, it's not simply a mesh back added onto a standard fencing mask. This fencing mask is actually deepened. Okay, now Armingil weren't the first company to do this with the Rearguard. There were a couple of other companies that did this. They deepened the fencing mask, thereby bringing the back of head protection further away from the back of the head, conferring better head protection. What Rearguard and Armingil did was add in that section of mesh at the back there to fill in that hole. Great idea. It's still easy enough to put on. But you need that flexible element at the bottom here. Now, as far as I know, I've had this mask for quite a long time, so as far as I know, they may already be on top of that. So I'd say check out their website, talk to the guys, find out what the options are for that. But I got this mask probably more than a year ago now, I think, but I never got the chance to review it in use. I have used it, but I didn't get the chance to review it in use because of the global pandemic. So global pandemic put a massive pause on this mask, but I've decided I need to put a review out about it now. So I do have some negative comments. Okay, the first negative comment was a little bit surprising to me, and that was that the bib, especially with the added on liner here, which seems on paper like a great idea, but the bib is too stiff. Now that stiffness has an issue. You might think stiff is great for more protection, and in theory, yes, you'd be right. But the problem is you need to be able to turn the head and move the head up and down. And what it has the problem of doing is, because that bib is so dense now and so stiff, it has a tendency of pushing the mask up off the top of your head. So that's a little bit of a problem. Now, I do understand from people I've heard that this does soften up and loosen up with use. So that's not a major criticism. I think I need to use this more to see if that happens, because as is often the things with shoes or jackets or anything else, they're often a bit stiff at the beginning. So I suspect that this will loosen up with use, but I should mention it because it was an issue for me in the 2 or 3 times that I used this for sparring before we got locked down. So the stiffness of the bib, particularly because of that liner, it's actually the liner that's stiffer than the actual bib itself. The bib is fine, the liner is just a little bit stiff, but maybe it loosens up. Maybe you could modify the liner slightly. I don't know, maybe you could do things to it to make that less of a problem. Also, you'll notice the liner is Velcro to the bib, and I didn't try this, but it could be that if you detach that Velcro, that it's a little bit more flexible now, because the two things can move more independently. So again, I didn't get to use this enough to find that out. The second thing is, again, relatively minor, but it's specific to me. Now, there's something about me which is different to certain other people out there, and that is that I have a big shiny dome here. Now, for that reason, I wear a skull cap. Okay, so I wear a rugby scrum cap on top of my head to absorb all the sweat, and therefore I use a size bigger mask. However, I went to training one of the times that I used this, and I'd forgotten my rugby scrum cap, so the mask was a little bit big on my head. But what I therefore also noticed, which I hadn't noticed before, was the inside liner on bare skin is really rough. And that's really bad. So not only, I mean, clearly I've got a bald head, lots of other people out there have got bald heads, partially or completely, but additionally you've got other skin on your head, and this liner can be a little bit rough, especially where the seams are sewn up here. Particularly, I have to say, the strap which goes around the back of the head, I found it really chafing on the back of my head. So I would say the Rearguard, the Armingil guys need to look at what these materials are made of and how they are on bare skin. If you've got a thick head of hair, then you might be absolutely fine. Or indeed, if you've got a rugby scrum cap on, you might be absolutely fine. But for those people who've got either thin hair or no hair on top of their heads, some of this is a little bit rough on the inside. So finally, I want to come back to the positive, and that is that overall, I think this is a really, really good design. But more importantly, it's really well made. With one exception, and again, this is throwing negative in with positive, but I'm going to be honest. So this back section is riveted into this arch, okay? And the prototype I had was actually bolted in, and the bolts survived very, very well. This one is actually done with rivets, and I have to say, within a very short period of time of me having this, one of the rivets at the side popped. And you'll notice you've got that gap in there, and that is because one of the rivets has popped out. Now, as it happens, it doesn't really make much difference to the use of the mask at all, but I'm mentioning it for pure transparency and everything else. And again, to remind you, this was sent to me for free to use and to sample and to review, but my reviews are always balanced, and I always try to mention negatives where I find them. But to come back to the positive, overall, great design. I really like the quality of the mesh used. I really like the extended back with that blocked in section. Great idea. They just need to finish off the design of how this interacts at the back there, I think. And I love this additional rubber brow ridge on here, because where masks most get blows and damage is up at the top here. So having that reinforced, it doesn't come into your vision at all, as far as I found. And other very, very important, underneath the mask is an actual steel. I'm going to have trouble showing you, but you can just about see it there, is a steel brow reinforce, which I actually reviewed on the prototype I had before. So you've got a huge amount of forward head protection. You've got this reinforcement on the outside, and you've got a reinforcement on the inside, preventing that mesh from coming in and hitting you in the face. So really, really great mask. I just feel there's a few little details that need refinement. Okay, the material on the inside and the strap, the thickness and flexibility of the bib, and sorting out the final details of how this attaches onto the back. I think it needs to be a little bit more streamlined as to, or they need to fix on how that is done. So I hope this has been useful. Check out the link below to Arm & Guild, and a great mask that I'll continue to use when I've got my scrum cap. And I will make sure that I don't ever forget my scrum cap, because it's really rough on my head. Cheers for watching, folks. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.